And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a horrible, horrible tragedy over the weekend. The first I saw of the tornado that ripped through the heart of our country was the video of the town from Mayfield, Kentucky, that just devastating. In fact, showed the kids and you're going, cannot believe the kind of devastation we saw there. And look, throughout Arkansas, throughout Kentucky, throughout Indiana, just ripped to shreds. And my first thought was, well, we should get ready for more of this. We should probably get used to these kind of stories because they seem to be happening more often. We seem to be seeing bigger, much more deadly storms. So we probably should start budgeting for this. Maybe we should have a special tax for it. I don't, at this point, I don't know. But we're not moving quickly enough to deal with our climate change issues. We're not moving quickly enough to address the underlying causes of these much more deadly storms. And look, there are more coming. All of the scientists agree. There may be a quack or two out there who's the outlier going, no, the oil industry pays me a lot of money, so I can't possibly be against big oil. The first thing I saw over the weekend, they said immediately there were 70 dead throughout, these states, and, more missing. I see the Kentucky governor today confirmed 64 dead. I think they said at least 105 people unaccounted for. So some of them are going to be gone. And you hear these stories coming out, how Amazon wouldn't let their workers go home. In fact, there was somebody texted his wife saying, they're not going to let us leave. There's the candle factory. In Kentucky where the workers were told, if you leave, you'll probably get fired. And you go, what? And I know the companies have all said, they've all denied it. They all have protocols, supposedly. And they absolutely deny it because, hey, they would be liable. Major lawsuits are probably still coming, but they have to come out and deny it. Now, here's the thing. I've known people who've worked in places where that's happened, where if you leave, you're going to be fired for whatever the reason is. There have been companies that, someone says, hey, our relatives in the hospital, if they pass away, I'm leaving. And they've been told, well, if you leave before your shift, you'll be disciplined or you'll be fired. And you go, what kind of heartless people do this? Oh, that's right, capitalists. Corporate America, because it's all about the profit. It's about getting those candles out the door. Those ever so important candles that are going to be the wonderful, thoughtful Christmas gifts that nobody wants. But if you leave, shame on you. And it's disgraceful that in this country that's allowed to happen, but it does. And, my first thought is, why? Why would you put up with that? Oh, that's right. Because you don't have a voice on the job. You don't have the ability. Over 90% of the workforce in this country are at-will employees, which means they can be fired for any or no reason. So leaving, you could get fired for. I have a hard time understanding why you would allow yourself to be in that situation. But the Kentucky governor said, hey, there's going to be all of this cleanup done. In fact, Mitch McConnell actually praised President Biden for his swift response. And I'm like, what did you expect him to do? Something like the last guy would do? Hold it up for a little bit because, hey, you didn't vote for me. I'm going to make sure you don't get anything. I'm going to hold this over you in your hour of need. What's Trump going to show up and throw paper towels? Crazy. Rand Paul wrote a letter, and I love this. Rand Paul wrote a letter. The governor of the Commonwealth has requested federal assistance this morning, and certainly further requests will be coming as the situation is assessed. I fully support those requests, writes Rand Paul, and ask that you move expeditiously to approve the appropriate resources for our state. And you go, but Rick, that's his state. He's taking care of his constituents. Yeah. And he should do that. He should have done it as it was going on. They should have been mobilizing the everything as it's happening. The response should have been heading in that direction. As I understand, it was. My problem here is Rand Paul. Again, Rand Paul, the guy who voted against the first responders bill. The same Rand Paul who voted against disaster relief for the people of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Yes, the same Rand Paul who voted against disaster relief for the Northeast after Hurricane Sandy. Yes, the same Rand Paul who voted against disaster relief after Hurricanes Laura and Delta in Louisiana. And yes, that same Rand Paul who voted against disaster relief after Hurricane Harvey in Texas. Oh, and let's not forget the 2019 disaster relief appropriations bill he voted against. So he's got a long history of going, well, those people, no. But my people, well, absolutely. We want everything. And expeditiously. Yeah, I kind of got a problem with that. Because sadly, I think we're going to end up in a moment where the next guy, if it's the former guy, shame on you if you're in a state that didn't vote for him. Scary, scary stuff. And we're really in this weird moment where it's going to get worse because we're not addressing it. We're not doing anything. We can't even get the money to say, hey, well, let's move to electric vehicles. We can't get the resources and the money to say, hey, let's put more solar panels in places that are going to be useful. We can't get that done because, well, the Joe Manchins of the world and the entire Republican Party. So, yeah, get ready for more of this. It's going to keep happening to nobody's delight. And it's all fun and games, and it's all, well, until it's you, until it hits your backyard. And then maybe these folks in Kentucky are not going to be going, maybe we should be addressing that climate change. Maybe as we build back, maybe we can build back better and make the buildings be able to withstand the winds that are coming. Because guess what? That region of the country, going to get hit a lot. I was reading an article that said, that area, prime for tornadoes. And the ones that are coming, the bigger ones, even more so. Sad, sad stuff. Speaking of sad stuff, over the weekend, we crossed another milestone. COVID-19 deaths passed 800,000. Thank you, former guy. Thank you for everyone who is held up, everyone being vaccinated. Thank you for the idiots running around without their masks on. Thank you for the dimwits and the puddle brains and the morons. Thank you. Because evidently this is what you've wanted. Today I spent a good portion of my day in an emergency room. I spent some time with a relative who we had to be in the emergency room with her 8 hours. Half of that emergency room were COVID patients. Now, 8 hours for something relatively simple. Nothing life-threatening. Relatively simple. Should have been in and out. This should have been quick. And in any normal day, would have been maybe 2 hours max. But today, and well, for the last year and a half, they've been at maximum capacity. The beds are all full. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to admit people. In fact, we sat on a chair in a hallway waiting to be seen. There were people that lined up in beds in the hallways waiting to be seen and moved into a room. Literally nowhere to go. And we haven't even hit bad times yet. Supposedly, we haven't maxed out yet, according to reports. But then again, we haven't hit the peak yet. We're still climbing, and it's going to get worse. And we know the COVID's going to get worse, and we know that this Omicron that's coming through going to get even much more worse. I look at what's going on over in England right now, and like anything, they're just now. We're probably next at some point. We were all in the Shark Tank together. We will all eventually be the flavor of the month. But right now they're saying they're preparing for up to 200,000 Omicron cases a day. They are telling their hospitals to send people home, get as many people out the door as you can who can survive out there, so that they can fill the beds up with people who are going to need the ventilators and all the stuff. In fact, when the ambulances come in, they're basically dropping people so that they can answer the more than 999 road calls they got on this particular day. And I'm looking at this and I'm sitting here and I can't help but see how they've set it up. Half the emergency room was people, the waiting room out in the front. You've been to an emergency room. Half of the people were there for something other than COVID. Half the people were there for COVID. And they were divided by this magic line. It's like the old no smoking signs. On this side of the sign, no smoking. On that side of the sign, smoking. And there was supposedly a magic line between them where it stopped. This is the same kind of thing. On this side of the walk aisleway, COVID. On this side, no COVID. Magic line. And I couldn't help but sit there and look at these folks and wonder, how many of you are vaccinated? I couldn't help but talk to some of the nursing staff, some of the people who work there, and ask them, what are the numbers here? And overwhelmingly, the people who are in that hospital, they didn't tell me any particular person, but overwhelmingly, the people who are in the hospital with COVID are unvaccinated. It is what it is. Overwhelmingly, the people who are coming in, unvaccinated. You go, but don't we know that they could? Yeah. And that's kind of where it is. And I look at these folks who show up every day, and they deal with this every single day. I was there one day and was ready to strangle people, dealing with the anger issues, dealing with people unable to have a simple conversation and understand that someone else has a point of view. Because look, the reception woman, I felt so sorry for her because nobody evidently hears anymore. They spew. And as the woman's trying to explain, they're not having it. And this is what this has all gotten us. We're in this spot where we no longer are able to communicate. And I look at these people who show up every day and deal with people on their worst days. Deal with people who, this is not a happy time for them. And are able to smile and are able to be nice to people and are able to care. I mean, that's the weird thing for me. And it gives me hope in humanity. It gives me some bit of hope that maybe better is possible. That not all of us are dimwits, puddle brains, and morons. But sadly, still enough of us are. And will it take another 800,000? Is this what it's going to take? I sure hope not. But that number of 800,000, kind of jumps out at you. When you have people go, it was no big deal. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal when 800,000 people are gone. Yeah, but, and you get this one all the time, they had comorbidities. Maybe so. But they still had more time. And this took that from them. And the question that I keep coming back to is, what are we going to do going forward? Are we going to continue down this path? Are we going to continue fighting every step of the way because somehow we're the victim for having for someone to request us to be decent? I live in an area where, it's a fairly rural area. It's a small hospital. Packed. And I worry about the people who, the car crash, the police officer who comes in, you name it, who's now got to wait longer to get the services that they need because there's no room for them. And two, now exposed to all of the people who have COVID. And as I'm sitting there, I couldn't help but think that I'm in a place where it is. I have done my foolhardy best to stay away from it at every turn. Don't go to the places where it could be. I stay away from large crowds if I can. I do the things that I can to just kind of back off a little bit. And when I am in large crowds, I try to give myself a little room. I don't get too close to people. I wash my hands enough. But I'm looking at this going, everyone should see what's going on in these places. Everyone should see the dedication of these workers, of these frontline heroes. Because I know we've forgotten the language. I know we've forgotten the verbiage we used to use and the accolades we used to throw. Essential, frontline hero, patriotic. I know we've forgotten that. It's long in the rearview mirror because a lot of us think, well, we're by it. It's over. We're vaccinated, most of us. Let them go. We're not past it. We still have things to do. And this comes back to our politics. I don't know how wearing a mask or getting vaccinated, I don't know how these became political issues. But we better figure our politics out. We better figure them out quickly. Because the virus ain't going anywhere. The climate is only going to get worse. They're saying there's a giant chunk of ice about ready to crack off that within the next couple of years could quite frankly raise the sea level several feet, which means major crisis of refugees rushing from the coasts. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. I don't see us doing anything about it because it hasn't hit yet. And then it'll be, oh my God, we've got to do something. Too late. And, it may not affect me entirely, but it's going to affect my kids. It's going to affect my grandkids. It is coming. Crazy, crazy stuff. But my heart goes out to the folks in Kentucky and Indiana and Arkansas and Missouri and those states where this tornado has just uprooted lives and destroyed everything these folks have had. I'm waiting for, and you can mark it on a calendar, I'm waiting for the insurance companies to be able to weasel their way out of paying, and these folks ending up getting the short end of the stick. And I really feel for the people who didn't have insurance and who are going to be, they're going to be out everything that they've ever had. Because if you saw those videos, if you saw the footage from the tornado site, it is total devastation. Scary stuff. Got a lot to get to today. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, former Ohio Democratic Party Chairman David Pepper is going to be here to share some thoughts on what's going on, maybe talk a little bit about the gerrymandering and how the GOP plans to steal 2022 and beyond. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. The call. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day prominent civil rights activist Ella Baker was born in Norfolk, Virginia. Her parents moved to Littleton, North Carolina when she was young. She often listened to her grandmother's stories of slave revolts and of the brutality she endured under slavery. Ella attended the historically black college Shaw University, graduating in 1927. After college, she moved to New York City and worked as a journalist. Ella was profoundly impacted by the Harlem Renaissance and became an educator for the WBAI, teaching African and labor history. She immersed herself in the activism of the period and worked on the Scottsboro Boys Defense Campaign. By 1938, she had joined the NAACP, traveling across the country to direct membership recruitment, fundraising, and building of local branches. In 1952, Ella became president of New York City's NAACP chapter, working for desegregation and on police brutality cases. Baker went to Alabama to help found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference after the successful Montgomery bus boycott to organize voter registration drives throughout the South. From there, she formed and led the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ella trained young, committed civil rights activists in a collectivist model of organizing and in participatory democracy. By 1964, she helped to organize the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party and its fight to become seated at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. She was involved in the defense of activist and friend Ann Braden, then targeted by HUAC, and later the Free Angelina movement in defense of then-jailed activist Angelina Davis. She was instrumental in the founding of the Third World Women's Alliance and supported various independence movements throughout the world. She died on her birthday in 1986.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Our quote of the day comes from Ohio Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown. He said, quote, Republican politicians are weaponizing redistricting to choose their voters rather than the other way around. He said, we can't let them get away with that, with weakening voters' voices in our democracy. He says, quote, it is time to end the filibuster and protect voting rights in America. And you can't disagree with that. And we've been saying this for months now. It's now time to actually get some action and do something about it. And here to share some thoughts on why this is imperative and maybe how we get to go about it, I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David is the former head of the Ohio Democratic Party. He's also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So you got your state senator saying, hey, we got to end this filibuster thing. We got to get something done on voting rights. We've got to take back some of the control because guess what? 2022 is just around the corner.
Yeah. And he, Ohio, myself and him and others, we've seen it up close. What they're doing to these states. I mean, we're basically, crying out to these senators. A lot of these states no longer really resemble functioning democracies, whether it's gerrymandered congressional seats, gerrymandered state house and state senate seats, other ways of voter suppression, like purging the voters for infrequent voting. I mean, it really is out of control. It's at this point, just to make it clear how bad it is, you essentially have a group of people in these state houses in Ohio and elsewhere who themselves have never really been in real elections. They haven't really been in democracy. All they've known is a set of rigged elections. So, they're basically doing all they've known. And that's why it's the federal government, which literally has a duty in the Constitution to make sure that all states are democracies. And I'm glad Sherrod Brown is calling upon that. Others are. It's late in the game. And it sounds dramatic unless you know the stakes. They really should not go home for recess until this is done.
I agree.
You start getting into 22, as you know, the election cycle starts. It's already started. It's too late, and they've got to show this is as serious as those of us living through it know that it's serious.
Right, but we've been talking about this for a long time. And, the other time when there was a chance to do something about it was during the Obama years. And Obama just said, well, if they're going to do that, we have to go get more votes. Well, there's a point at which you can't make up for the number of votes that they're blocking. You just can't do it.
You can't. I mean, we're a great case study. It's not even right to ask these voters. We're talking about brutal voter suppression. So if they are purging hundreds of thousands of voters from the rolls, to then say to your volunteers, go re-register those voters, battle government suppression with volunteer efforts, it's not a fair fight. And at a certain point, and this is part of what happened to Hillary Clinton in 2016, she spent so much of her time re-registering purge voters. We all know she didn't get enough time with swing voters all over states like Ohio. So once you start forcing campaigns to make up for absolute suppression by government, it's a losing proposition. Every once in a while it may work, but it's not the right thing to ask folks to do. And it's in the end, you won't ever make up the gap for brutal gerrymandering that rigs elections and the suppression of hundreds of thousands or millions of voters. You're just not going to be able to do that on a voluntary basis.
Now, what do you say to the person, David, who goes, but I've got conservative friends who they look at the ballot box and they complain that Democrats are stealing it, they're stuffing it, they've got illegals, they've got all of these fanciful ideas of things that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and the pillow guy and all the whole cavalcade of crazy kept spewing to them. They truly believe that the game's rigged. So the justification is, well, we're just doing what the game allows.
Yeah, at some point, you try and battle facts with facts, but at this point, you simply get it done in the Senate. We have 50 senators, we have a majority of the House, we have a president. We have to get it done in this window. And so even if, hopefully some Republicans understand it, others won't, at some point, you just got to go make it happen. And when you have the majorities, which we do, you have to do it. So the key conversation is actually in this case with Joe Manchin and other senators, and he's not the only one, let's be clear,
right,
who are not taking the position Sherrod Brown is, and they're hung up on getting a filibuster. Now, we could debate the filibuster all day on a lot of topics, But I sincerely believe that if you read the Constitution and you understand that in states across the country, Republicans are attacking democracy and voting rights by passing laws without ever getting one Democratic vote. So that they don't say they need to get at the state level Democrat buy-in. Well, why should we require getting Republican buy-in at the federal level to protect against these attacks at the state level that don't get Democratic buy-in? It's asymmetric warfare, and you lose it. And we don't need to convince, Rob Portman of this. We simply need to convince 50 Democrats and continue to do what the House already did and just get it done. And then we can spend all next year, pushing what we've done on infrastructure, talking about Build Back Better if it passes. This is not necessarily something you run on, but you got to get it done to give, candidates and voters a fair chance to participate in democracy, which in too many states right now, they just don't have.
Yeah, no, I've had conversations about your state of Ohio and mine of Pennsylvania as well. Where I live in Pennsylvania, there was the one election year where, Democrats got 500,000 more votes, but only won 5 of the 18 congressional seats because it is so badly gerrymandered. And Ohio, kind of the same thing, only the difference is in Pennsylvania, Democrats usually win statewide offices while Republicans usually win them in Ohio. So what I get from people is going, well, Ohio's a solid red state. And I'm going, not so much. It's kind of a gerrymandered state. And the reason I think they win those statewide races is because a lot of people have gone, what's the point of me voting in a 65-35 district?
Right. Well, there are a couple of things going on. Our general breakdown is somewhere Republicans vote in these congressional races statewide for Republicans in about the low to mid 50s. Democrats, even in these terribly gerrymandered districts, added up around Ohio, we're getting about 45 or 46. A fair map would mean out of 15 districts, we have, 7 in a good year, 6 in a not so good year. The map they're proposing is literally 13-2 or 12-3. It's outrageous. The last decade, even in an Obama blue year, even in a year where Cher had won by 8, the map was always the same outcome: 12 Republicans, 4 Democrats. It's total, and none of them were even close. It's totally rigged. So of course, Democrats aren't walking in and saying, we deserve 13 out of 15 seats or 12 out of 15. But us trying to get, let's say Democrats pushed a map that was somehow 11 Democrats and 4 Republicans. That's as out of whack with how Ohio voters are voting as the current Republican proposed map. So they're going way beyond what would be normal, anywhere close to fair. And you add it all up in Ohio and Pennsylvania, other states, that way you guarantee the entire Congress for a decade.
Right.
And at some point, this looks more like how Russia runs democracy Putin runs democracy in Russia and Orban in Hungary than it does America. And at some point, we've got to wake up to that problem. And here's the good news: the bills that passed the House and that is now in front of the Senate correct for this and many other problems if they simply pass it.
No, it's something we absolutely have to do. But in talking about what you were just saying there, you look at the numbers and it explains why nothing that we the people want actually gets done. When you're not afraid of the voting populace because the game is already rigged, you're not really that responsive to the needs of the people. And we had talked not too long ago about a representative in your state who, when a constituent called and said, hey, how come we can't do something about this town that is basically, abandoned? And the guy said, move. I don't know in what functional democracy a representative tells their constituent, hey, if you don't like it, move. I don't get it.
Yeah. And this is a really important point. If this is what I would say to the hypothetical Republican friend you mentioned, that even though we don't have to convince them to pass the current bill, the current state of democracy and the lack of choice in elections is crushing not just blue parts of these states, but red parts of these states. These towns that we're talking about, the ones that are like the rural county seat or smaller, they desperately need infrastructure. The infrastructure is popular in these places because they have the streets that have never been paved in years. or other problems. Their main streets are dying, yet their state reps and especially their Congress people are voting against those things, not just once, but for years. And they're voting for a trickle-down economy approach that never helps lift these towns. And they do it for the reason you mentioned. They're never going to lose. So the public outcomes, as bad as they are in these small towns and these rural areas, they don't cost these people anything. The Congress people. So the decline in rural Ohio and small town Ohio is directly related to the fact that there's no democracy in these places. And so it's not just a blue-red thing. When it comes to how so much is falling apart that we used to think was strong, this sort of small, mid-sized town pride that was the core of places like Pennsylvania and Ohio, it's collapsing in large part because there's no democracy left in these places. It may feel good. They see someone of their own party winning an election, but it doesn't feel good when the towns represented by these people are falling apart and the people in office are voting against what these towns need again and again and again.
No, you're right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with David Pepper. He's the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. In looking at this legislation, which some of it seems really common sense. We should allow every person to vote. That seems like common sense. It's something we used to have for a moment or two. It seems to me that there are ways that we can open it up to make voting a lot easier. I would like to see a holiday. I would like to see, on a weekend, I would like to see a lot of things done.
Yeah.
But I find interesting that a lot of my conservative friends, not so interested in changing any of that stuff. They kind of like the rigidity of that second Tuesday of the month from 7 to 7, and I don't quite know why.
Well, what's funny is I hear that often, and I normally vote on that Tuesday too, and that's fine. But most states move to early, like Ohio. We had a disaster in 2004. Everyone knew it. It was Republicans who were in charge that opened up early voting, not Democrats, after the disaster of 2004, where there was not enough capacity on election day to deal with all the voters. So they opened it up. And the truth is, a lot of people found it to be convenient, both Republicans and Democrats. And now we've got this. Here's an example where I agree with you to some degree, but polling shows us that the thing the number of states started doing a couple of years ago, where you can drop that ballot in a drop box, where you don't have to pay a postage stamp, as opposed to putting it in the mail, has turned out to be incredibly popular. Voting numbers go higher. In Ohio, 80% of voters polled said they would love to have more drop boxes. And in rural Ohio, they don't want to drive an hour each way on a small rural highway to deliver that vote to a drop box. So there's also support there. But in the end, because it does help in cities, they aren't doing it. So in some cases, when you actually break it down to what the specific thing is, voting early, because maybe you'll get called away that last weekend and you don't end up being able to vote, voting by a drop box. These are things that when you ask about them individually are actually very popular. But the people in these state houses, believing some of the hype or wanting to make voting harder, simply can't find it within themselves to make it so that more and more people vote. But we know these different mechanisms. Washington State, Oregon, much higher levels of voting, no fraud. Why? Because they've made it more convenient. And by the way, until the last couple of years, a lot of these measures weren't even partisan or controversial. Georgia was the state with the Republicans in charge of everything that had drop boxes all over the place. No one even said a word about it until the pandemic. Now they're trying to get rid of them. But these things were never controversial. There was never problems. They were never partisan. So this is getting back to this sort of right-wing big lie machine that is saying that all this stuff is fraudulent and there are all these people voting fraudulent. It's just not true. And so that's allowing them to cut off these ways of voting that have actually been very convenient for people.
Yeah, but it's like the old saying: you say the lie big and long enough, people are going to believe it. And I still have people who want to argue with me that here in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won Pennsylvania because he was up by 600,000 votes on Tuesday night. And they will not get it through their head that, that's because only half of the people got to vote. They didn't count the rest of the votes for the next several days because they were in paper ballots.
Yeah, it's very common, and it's being amped up. One thing, by the way, that Pennsylvania should do in Ohio, and this goes back to a Democratic Secretary of State, they actually run all the ballots through the machines that come in early before Election Day. They don't wait. So this problem that it comes so late and for days after, they don't actually total the numbers until Election Day, but they run them through. So in Ohio, the first votes announced at 7:40, about 10 or 15 or 20 minutes after the polls close, are all the early votes that came in up until Election Day. And it's made at least that part of these crazy theories go away.
Yeah,
and we have the reverse outcome here. For an hour or two, Democrats around the country think that the Democrats way ahead in Ohio, and then the day of votes catch up. Now, no one's sitting around acting like that's some kind of conspiracy. It's just, but I will say, by getting the votes in early and running them through the machines early, we do end up cutting off a lot of this, conspiracy stuff when they come in late and things change in the late hours or the next couple of days. That's something every state could fix if they wanted to. By the
So
way.
last question I've got for you. How do we move forward on this? How do we get I know Pat Toomey's not going to come around magically in his final days. I know Rob Portman's probably not going to come around. How do we get this move through?
They won't touch it. I think, Joe Manchin, I'll give him credit. He's clearly wants to be bipartisan. Okay. That's his thing. That's how he's been. When he realizes that the side that is suppressing the vote is not going to magically all of a sudden vote to stop that suppression, my hope is his effort of being bipartisan, he figures out it's not working, and then they come up with a way to not get rid of the filibuster entirely. Joe Manchin and other Democratic senators aren't going to do that. But in the area of lifting democracy in states, so states like Ohio actually have democracy again, they're just the filibuster. There's no legitimate basis for it to be used to stop voting rights legislation. This is something we've talked about this before. The founding fathers literally worried that corrupt state houses could undermine our entire country's democracy. And they wrote in the Constitution that all states, they said, the federal government shall guarantee they all have a democracy, basically.
Yep.
There's no reason a filibuster should ever get in the way of that.
I'm right there with you.
Folks like Joe Manchin to see that after making a good faith effort to get Republicans, which they're unfortunately not going to get.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. David, I appreciate the time. Great stuff, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care.
Good stuff. David Pepper, former head of the Ohio Democratic Party. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That was the day that Namibian workers began a general strike to protest the contract labor system. As a colony of South Africa until 1990, Namibia faced many of the same apartheid-like measures that blacks faced in South Africa. Black migrant workers in Namibia comprised the majority of workers in the diamond mines, fisheries, and commercial farms. They were forced to live in the northern third of the country and were subjected to the pass system. The pass system determined where they could live and work and when they could travel. Restrictions on their rights as workers were directly tied to restrictions they experienced as colonial subjects. Because there were no trade unions at the time, this strike is considered to be an important first step in the 20-year fight for independence. More than 13,500 black contract workers participated, effectively shutting down 23 key workplaces and 11 mines. The indigenous Ovambo and Kavango workers demanded the right to choose jobs and contracts, to bring their families to distant work locations, a new pass system, and increased wages based on work type, not skin color. In her book, Labor and Democracy in Namibia, Gretchen Bauer says that while workers did win wage increases, the pass system remained largely intact. Employers were angry that workers now had the right to bid on jobs, quit at will, and receive holiday bonuses and leave pay. Workers were upset that they were still subjected to restrictions of movement and arbitrary arrest and detention. But the strike began the long process of eroding the pass system, contract labor, and second-class citizenship for the indigenous workers of Namibia. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's kind of interesting to me as Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney were reading some texts today. Kind of interesting why the Lauren Boeberts and the Marjorie Trader Greens and that ilk are so hell-bent on us not seeing what they were doing with their phones on January 6th. We're now finding out. In fact, some really interesting texts came out today. Well, a couple from Donald Jr. Dumb Jr. was actually almost the voice of reason on January 6th, was actually the most astute political advisor, and I can't actually believe I said that. But here to share some thoughts on, have I just lost my mind? Did I wake up on the wrong side of reality? I've got Fred Wellman here to talk with us. He's a political consultant and senior advisor to the folks over at the Lincoln Project. Fred, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be here, Rick. Thanks a lot.
So I'm looking at the texts today, and I guess I've always thought of Junior as kind of a dope, not too bright, whatever. This was actually fairly good advice.
Well, that's true, but I'm not going to lie. I find great entertainment the fact that he had to text the chief of staff of the White House to get hold of his dad. I mean, it's just, what does that say right there? Maybe he had good advice, but he couldn't get it to his own father. He had to go to the chief of staff and beg the chief of staff. And that's the thing. I mean, and what I think we talked about a little bit, it's really telling to see the conversations that are occurring that day. And as somebody pointed out that I stole, of course, because I always do that, this is the unprivileged stuff. Can you imagine what's in the privileged? What's he hiding? I mean, this is stuff he wasn't hiding. I can only imagine what he hid or is trying to hide. Right. And that's probably the conversations begging Trump to do something, who refused to do so. I think today was a very powerful day. I think the committee did a genius job of reading them out loud. I personally am just absolutely chomping at the bit, waiting for public hearings so we can see this live in real time.
Yeah, before we go into any further stuff, do you think it's going to matter? Do you really honestly and truthfully think at this moment it's going to matter? Because I'll tell you, I think we're so in our camps that I don't know that there are any 3s or 4s left. I think everyone's a 5 at this moment.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we are in our separate corners. We've all picked our sides. It's very hard to break through our separate media ecospheres. We don't bridge that gap very well. I'm actually working on a new project right now that I'm very excited about. I can't announce yet that's going to research a little bit of that. It's like, how do we break through each other? But you're right. But in the end, for me, Rick, is I kind of given up the idea that I'm going to convince a lot of these folks. What I do want is justice. I was a soldier for 22 years. What we saw was an attack in our capital. Almost 150 police officers went to the hospital. To me, I just want justice at this point. Maybe that's all it's going to take. Maybe somebody finally goes to jail. We'll finally see some justice. But actually reaching the other side, I don't see it happen.
Because most of the people who I know are still Trump supporters, and most of the ones who are Trump supporters are still. They have a different narrative. They look at the January 6th not as how I look at it, as an attempt to overthrow our democracy and stop the certification of an election that had no reason to be stopped. But they still look at it through this alternative rationale lens that I don't know that we're ever going to be able to reach them. And I think that's dangerous because, look, 10 years down the road, I still think this is with us.
Yeah, that's the terrifying part. And look at the history. And it's God wins the law. You're not supposed to bring up the Nazis. I got that. Well, let's look a historic example of a time where a democracy fell to an autocratic movement. April 8th, 9th, 1923, beer hall putsch, Munich, Germany. Hitler uses his right-wing General Ludendorff as his symbolic head of his movement. They stormed a beer hall in Munich where the Bavarian president was speaking, trying to convince him to lead a march to Berlin to take over the country. It fails when the police say, nah, and the soldiers say no. 16 Nazis die, about 6 police die. Hitler goes to jail. Hopefully that's the end of the story, right? But it wasn't, was it? That failed coup ended up teaching Hitler that he wasn't going to win the government through violence. He decided to go through the democratic levers of power. And he said something key that date, 10 years. 10 years later, Hitler is the chancellor of Germany through essentially a democratic process that he had manipulated, minority vote, and takes over and eventually taking over the entire country. So for me, I look a lot at the historic analogy of where we are, that a lot of folks were calling January 6th, our Reichstag fire, but I completely disagree. January 6th was our beer Paul push. And the autocratic movement we're facing is learning the lessons I think that they learned, which is, okay, so let's not do that. Let's take over election boards across the country. Let's pass 250 laws rolling back voting rights. Let's pass really creepy laws that mean that a legislator could basically overturn an election they deem as not right. I mean, that's what scares me the most, Rick, is I don't necessarily think we're going to have another maybe attempt on the Capitol, but I do believe we're going to have a worse movement, which is one that takes over our country through essentially our process.
Right. No, this is where I just had a conversation with David Pepper, former head of the Ohio Democratic Party, and talking
Smart
about
guy.
Trying to do something about making sure that we're going to be able to vote in 2022 and beyond. Yep. And I can't say that that's assured based on what I'm seeing going on in some of these Republican-led states, and that's frightening to me.
Yeah, it is terrifying, and even states that aren't necessarily Republican. I mean, look at Georgia, and look at the way they're doing it. And what's really scary is they're pushing the local election boards, they're pushing out the local school boards, they're pushing these movements at the local level where a lot of these decisions are made. Remember, there is no national elections. There's elections managed across the country by different states and different local boards. So I think they're very aware, and I do believe, and I'm a critic of our Democratic Party. I am a Democrat for the last 6 years or so, and my frustration is there just seems to be an obtuseness and a lack of action to recognize the danger that democracy is in. I did catch you talking to David about the idea we can out-organize this kind of suppression. The problem is it's not. I think we've gone beyond that. That you can almost make that argument 5 years ago or 4 years ago, even 2 years ago. But now they've passed so many laws that you can out-organize, maybe even get the votes and say, well, sorry, look, that he dotted his I instead of crossing his T, so we're going to throw those 50,000 votes out. They've made these laws where they could literally just totally take over an election board, and even if we did out-organize them, they could still toss our votes out. It's terrifying. Yeah. I mean, I wish somebody called me a doomer today, like, well, yeah, I have a little doom and gloom, I admit that. I'm also fighting.
No, I'm a realist. I live in the real world, and I see what's going on. Right. And I've read the quote unquote confidential memos that the people like Jenna Ellis think are confidential because she wrote it across the top of the page. I'm looking at this stuff where there was a very well thought out plan on how they were going to overturn an election, the votes of we the people, and thought that we would swallow it. That's the amazing thing, that there were so many of them. Look, you could have one crank who comes up with this idea, but the fact that it permeated a number of places in that administration and a lot of people were briefed on it, that's scary.
And they're still keeping it secret. The funny thing about conspiracies is they usually come out. They're doing a pretty good job, and they're doing it right in front of us. I mean, I saw a great article today. Someone like, don't be fooled. They're not doing this in secret. They're not trying to take over our country in secret. They're doing it right in our face. Bannon's being very obvious. He's more than happy to tell us exactly what he's doing. And unfortunately, I believe some of the people who we trust to be in power have a certain, I call it norms and traditions, right? They're all about norms and traditions. I remember a lot of people saying after the election they want to get back to normal. One of the things I say quite often, and I say it pretty crass, and I won't say it on radio because it's not nice, but norms and traditions went out the freaking window when that orange guy came down the escalator. And if you think we're going to get back to norms and traditions, we're wrong. It's a pendulum, and the pendulum needs to swing back. A friend of mine is a sociologist here in St. Louis, and he teaches at one of the universities. He says, this is a sociological thing. And there's an experiment where they push the line of how far the line could go. And when you push the line of what's a norm and what's a tradition and what's a system, the new line becomes the line. And since we have not drawn, since we discovered the Hatch Act is completely useless, we discovered that most of the government ethics regulations hinge on the president being mad about it, and he doesn't, right? And so if we don't snap those back, we don't tighten those ethics laws, if we don't tighten the voting laws, then we have allowed a new norm to be set. And the next Trump won't be so stupid, and he'll be much greedier.
No, that's what I've been saying for a while. The reality is Trump was if someone whispered in his ear, it shot out his mouth. I don't think he had that filter. I'm concerned about somebody like DeSantis who's a little bit smarter, someone like Josh Hawley who's a little bit smarter, people who are true, in my words, fascists and true authoritarians who understand why and how to use the system, where Trump really didn't. He was just the bull in the china shop.
I live in Missouri now. The Attorney General here Eric Schmidt is running for Senate against Eric Greitens, of all people. The leading Republican candidate is an accused sexual assaulter and stealing, ethics regulations breaker already. But so Eric Schmidt's decided the best way he can run is to be outrageously more Trumpy and more right-wing anyway. So the Attorney General here is suing school districts over their mask mandates. He's suing private businesses for wanting to have vaccine mandates. He's literally spent the last year and a half using taxpayer money and using his office to perpetuate his bona fides as a right-wing nut job. And meanwhile, crimes aren't being prosecuted, crimes aren't being addressed. But he's running around the state suing his own citizens. He actually put out a memo this week because he's misinterpreting the law, but he's convincing school districts that they can't even tell kids to wear masks. In my girlfriend's school, kids are getting in fights at school because parents are sending their kids to school saying that their kids shouldn't wear masks. Kids are walking out of class, being forced into class. Kids are getting in fights over it because it's disturbing the class. He's literally creating vigilantism in high schools. A bus driver, a police officer got on a school bus and told the bus driver she couldn't tell the kids to wear masks and threatened her. And by the way, it was a police officer from a different district. That's going on because the Attorney General of Missouri, in his brain, has decided that's a great way to perpetuate his campaign. That is the next trouble, the Republican and Trumpist I'm scared of. That's evil and maniacal in its scope, that he'd allow kids in high school to fight each other to help him.
No, but that's predictable. I mean, all of this stuff is
right.
is in the playbook. We need the new brown shirts. We need to brainwash the kids into believing that they're victims, and nobody plays the victim card like Republicans.
Right.
You could disagree with that, but I'm watching Dr. Oz today go off about how the Philly Inquirer is going to call him by his actual
canceled.
name, and somehow he's now a victim.
Did you see him in Pittsburgh? I'm here in Pittsburgh. Not just here because I like beer and sandwiches. Jesus, man. But having said, yeah, exactly. And no, look, I'm an Iraq veteran. Okay, I was there for OIF-1. I spent a lot of times in Iraq. My first tour, I was doing civil affairs in northern Iraq, building schools and sitting with my Iraqi partners. And how Saddam ruled Iraq was he pitted everyone against each other. The reason a Sunni minority was able to rule Iraq for 35, 40 years, because he had the Shia, he had the Sunni, he had the Kurds all fighting each other. They're so busy hating each other. Nobody had time to hate him and overthrow him. And that's the maniacal brilliance of it. That's let's be honest, where genocide came from was, we have somebody to hate. Obviously, it's the Jews' fault. Yeah. And here we are in America. It's these these vaccine Nazis who are fascists. I mean, the idea that they're calling this administration fascist, they don't want us to die of a preventable illness. That's scary. And to me, to see high school students coming home frazzled from their day at school, not because it was hard or because school was tough, because the Attorney General of the state is encouraging vigilantism over masks, a piece of freaking cloth. And I tell you, I've seen this story. I had to fight through the desert to end that story. It tears me to death. It just tears me up to know that I might have to fight through my own country.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're in an interesting moment. They say, may you live in interesting times. These are those. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Fred Wellman. Fred is a political consultant and also senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. So how do we move this back? I mean, the Lincoln Project started by former Republicans who saw what the former guy was doing. I thought there would be more of those kind of Republicans who would want to move away from, because look, I have respect for honest, true conservatives, people who want to save institutions, and the kind of people who aren't just flag waving, kind of look at me, but actually care about institution and the future of this country. I used to believe there was more of them. I guess I'm wrong.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And why are there so few of us who have turned on this? Why are there so few, if you will, the Reagan Republicans? I grew up I was a defense hawk. I was a soldier for my entire adult life. I believed in strong defense. I believed in coalitions. I was not terribly socially conservative, but I fit into that party. And then one day I woke up and I didn't fit in the party anymore. They had moved away from me. So you're right. I did expect more. I mean, it's nice to see the people we've had. It's nice to have allies like Bill Kristol or, the Republicans, for accountability, the Republican Accountability Project. We do have our allies, but just simply not enough. Too many have decided that power is more important. And the scarier part is, if you saw that article about Peter Mayer, the congressman, where he talked about how one of his colleagues literally told him on the floor during the impeachment vote, he simply could not vote for it for fear for his life, for fear for his family. that they're actually afraid of this. It's was it the leopard that eats your face, right? They're actually afraid of their own constituents that will turn on them, and not just run their political careers, but their entire lives.
Yeah.
And so,
and that's why they're taking pictures with guns around Christmas trees.
That's right. It's just extremists. The extremists are ruining the day. And look, I'd be lying if we said that this just popped up because of Trump. This is the inevitable conclusion. My colleague at Lincoln Project, Stuart Stevens, Stuart wrote a book called "It Was All a Lie," and it's sort of the realization that this has been building for 3 decades. This is the inevitable conclusion of a conservative movement that was becoming more and more extreme, and then Donald Trump sort of brought that out. So it'd be reckless of us to say it's new.
I remember '92 and the speeches Pat Buchanan was giving back then. He was radical in '92. Today he'd be a Democrat.
Yeah, just about, but you saw it. I mean, the thing that scared me, the politicization of our military, the failure of our political media to understand the moment they're in. I tweeted today, it's not like, it isn't that this isn't a partisan issue. Now it's democracy versus anti-democracy. It's autocracy versus democracy. It's only partisan because one party has given themselves over to an autocratic movement. Yeah. I'd love to go back to argue about tax policy. That'd be the best day ever, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I would love that. I wish we could have that, but we can't. But here's my problem. My problem is it's being framed right, left. It's being framed Democrat, Republican. It's being framed in all these ways. When the reality is it's the extraordinarily wealthy against the rest of us, because who's funding all of this stuff? For me, that's the central question in all of this. Who's funding it?
Shocking. Peter Thiel, the Koch brothers. I mean, it's all right there in front of you. You'd be a fool not to see it. Hell, Mr. Man at the time, Man of the Year, is moving his country from California to Texas, right? I mean, I think it is right in your face all the time. And those powerful interests are able to spend ridiculous amounts of money. I was very disappointed to see Bernie Marcus gave $1 million to a PAC supporting Eric Greitens. My God, Eric Greitens is a monster. I know Eric Greitens. I've known Eric Greitens for over a decade. He's a monster. And this man gave him $1 million. How can you keep up with that? How do you and I, as average Americans, donate the maximum amount to a campaign of whatever we can afford, $50, possibly fight those kind of interests? And that's where I think the Lincoln Project came in. I think a lot of the reason we succeeded is we had a voice. We understood how to communicate to the audience. We had one moment. We had one thing we wanted to do: to convince 3 to 4% of Republicans that voted for Trump to not vote this time.
You guys did a great job.
I'd like to say we were part of a coalition.
It was great. I'd love to have you talk about that at another point. But Fred, I got to take a quick break right here. I appreciate the time. Please come back.
I look forward to it.
Good stuff. Fred Wellman, political consultant, senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. That was the day that longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died. Gompers was born to a Jewish family in England. He was a cigar maker by trade. Gompers became involved with the labor movement at a very young age. He joined the Cigar Makers Local Union number 15 when he was just 14 years old. He became the head of the newly formed AFL in 1886, a position he held until 1894. A year later, he once again became president of the AFL and remained in that seat until his death. Under his leadership, the AFL became the leading labor organization in the United States. The AFL focused the strength of its organizing on skilled workers and tradesmen. The main emphasis of the union was winning better wages, hours, and working conditions for its membership. Some in the labor movement thought Gompers' approach was too conservative. The Industrial Workers of the World was formed in 1905, with a goal to reach out with the union message beyond skilled workers. Once Gompers was asked, "What does labor want?" His response still has relevance today. What does labor want? We want more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less arsenals, more learning and less vice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. In fact, more of the opportunities to cultivate our better natures, to make manhood more noble, womanhood more beautiful, and childhood more happy and bright. In 2007, a statue of Samuel Gompers was unveiled at a park named after the labor leader in Chicago. Gompers was one of the most significant figures in the U.S. labor movement. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you got a question, comment, something on your mind. So I remember back in 2016, Donald Trump said that the mob takes the fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment? And look, a number of conservatives, a number of Trumpkins, a number of his cabinet seem to be going to be doing just that. Although today, Mark Meadows, the January 6th panel voted to hold him in contempt. That will go to the full House for their approval to move on criminal charges. He will join Steve Bannon, the former White House strategist, and former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark. So potentially three of the former administration folks potentially going to be behind bars. And look, they are making a joke out of this. Bannon's, playing the victim card like nobody else. That Ali Alexander was on I think it was OAN. They're ruining me. Yeah, that's what happens when you plan to overthrow the government. Your treason shall be punished. That's how this stuff is supposed to work. And you hear this victim card often. Oh, it was just a peaceful thing. No, it wasn't peaceful. Oh, they stole the election. No, none of the things that you claimed came true. None of the things that you were out in front of the porn shop landscape place spewing happened. None of it. And this is where, in talking with people like Fred Wellman, who've been around Republican politics a long time, knows the game. And there are a lot of Republicans that are, coming and going, we were wrong. We bought the Reagan lines. We bought the trickle down. We bought the give the wealthy everything that they could want. We bought it. And this is what it's turned into. Absolute power corrupting absolutely. And, as we said with David Pepper a bit ago, Republican politicians, and look, even some Democratic politicians, doesn't matter what the constituents think. They're in safe districts. I remember a time when, they had to worry about going back to the voter if they voted the wrong way, because they might get voted out. Now, most of the time, you win your primary, you're okay. A-okay. Because we have so badly rigged the game. And we've rigged it in a way that the moneyed interests always win. This is what's frustrating to me. The frustrating part of this is, like Fred said, I would love for us to sit down and argue about tax policy. I would love for us to sit down and argue about the right to join and form unions. I would love to sit down and argue about actual policy and how we move forward and what the effects of those policies are going to be and how we should implement them, all with the idea that both of us, regardless of what our opinion is, want to move forward, want to do something better, want to improve, want to make lives better. Sadly, what I keep seeing is you got one party, an entire political party going, don't care. Only care about what I'm told to care about, what the moneyed interests who fill my coffers, what they seem to want. Oh, but Rick, you're being hyperbolic. No, I'm not being hyperbolic. Why is it that the things that we, the people, have wanted for decades never come to fruition? Ask anybody. They want health care. People want health care. They want to make sure that they get sick, that they don't have to worry about, are they going to go broke? That if their children get sick, they don't have to worry about, are they going to go broke? That while you're lying on your deathbed, that you're not dialing the insurance company, getting rejected at every turn. People want health security. People want retirement security. People want good schools for their kids. This isn't hard. But it's hard if you're serving two masters. It's hard if you're serving the corporate masters and, well, your leadership masters. The voters don't play into this. Now, I look at this thing with Mark Meadows. The stuff that we've found that he's handed over so far, quite telling. these memos that have come out about, how they were going to spin stealing the election, and then the details that they went into and the number of people that they briefed on this, military people. It's frightening. It's angering. And it makes me go, okay, I think like Fred said, if this is what they're showing us, what is it that we're not going to see? How bad was this? Now, I said from the beginning, I think Trump was orchestrating most of it. I think that and we now know from one of the emails that the National Guard was going to be there on January 6th to protect the good people, to protect the Trump supporters, because they were hoping Antifa would show up and cause a ruckus so they could put it down. And then they could declare martial law and all kinds of stuff could happen. But nobody showed up. It's hard to have a riot. It's hard to have like a clash of two sides if one side doesn't show up. And there were no counter protesters. They had the whole place to themselves and they trashed it. They were planning for war. And it's bad when Donald Jr. is texting Meadows saying, hey, we got to do something about this. We got to stop this. We got to condemn this. We need an Oval Office address, he texted. He has to lead now. This is gone. It's gone too far. It's gotten out of hand. And Trump did nothing. Will history remember that? Will history hold all of these people accountable? Like Benny Thompson has said to Bannon and to Clark and to Meadows? When history's written, will they look favorably upon all of these people who did this? All of the folks who were there on January 6th. Will your ancestors look back and go, yep, he was a good guy, tried to overthrow the election? We live in interesting times. Now, the Heritage Foundation's all up in arms. Angry they are. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Heritage Foundation is the right-wing think tank. This is where all of the bad ideas come from. Their statement was Nancy Pelosi and the January 6th committee's attack on former members of Congress and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is yet another obvious attempt to punish conservatives and sow division in America. Did I miss something? Oh, yeah, January 6th. Yeah. I didn't miss it. I watched it on TV. They go on to say the committee is abusing its congressional authority, compromised. They're compromised, and they have politicians who are carrying out a partisan fishing expedition with the intent on destroying the reputations of public servants. You mean traitors? Because it's always been curious to me why Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and Gates and the rest of them were so dead set on Verizon not handing out any type of communications, none of their cell phone records. Nothing. Can't have any of it. I want to know what were they saying to each other? What were they texting each other in those moments? What communications were going on? What was going back and forth between Meadows and Dumb Jr.? What was going on between Meadows and Trump? What was going on between Bannon and Trump? What was going on between all of these people who were coordinating this stuff? What was going on? Because they were expecting a riot. They were expecting Antifa, man. They were hoping to crack some heads with the National Guard. Only no Antifa. So to this point, you have this committee, 9 members, 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And I think, again, the Republicans screwed themselves by taking their ball and going home. They should have been here. Because it was unanimous in the vote to hold Meadows in contempt. And I hope they put them in jail. But at this point, how much information he's given, I'm sure we're going to see more over the coming days. But doesn't it make you angry? Doesn't it make you think just a little bit about what these folks are capable of doing? And I think Fred Wellman is right. The next guy was always the scary guy. I said that back on Inauguration Day 2017. As bad as this guy is going to be, we can't allow him to normalize this kind of behavior. We can't allow this to happen again. And what's happening right under our nose. And look, Republicans are so good at this. They're doing the organizing on the local level to take over school boards. They're doing the organizing on the local level to take over local offices. And somebody's funding that. The moneyed interests are pushing into this. They're doing tons of grassroots or kind of work with big money support. Well-funded, well-organized. And for what purpose? At the end of the day, it's about more for the people at the top. It's not about democracy. It's not about freedom. Do you think the 1% wants every schmo to have freedom? No. Do you think they want everybody to vote? No. They don't want everyone to vote because they don't want to pay any more taxes. They don't want to pay any taxes. Most of them think that they pay enough by, creating jobs. And we're told that they're the job creators. We should be grateful for them. We shouldn't tax them. I see these on like TikTok and Instagram and all of these social media platforms where you see these influencers who go on these long stories about how, we should be grateful to the billionaires. We should be grateful to their innovations, and we should be grateful to Elon Musk because, he built SpaceX and he built the Tesla, and we should be grateful. And I'm going, no, we shouldn't be. We had NASA that corporate America dismantled because they wanted the money. They wanted to be able to take it over for themselves. They wanted to patent it. They wanted us dependent on them. And when you go, hey, we can't get to the space station, can we hitch a ride with one of your rockets, Jeff or Elon? Sure, but it's going to cost you an enormous sum. There's no such thing as a benevolent employer. They're good ones, but they're not benevolent. It's frustrating beyond comparison. When I see today, I saw somebody that I know write on Facebook that how wonderful Amazon is, and basically being a social media influencer, saying how all this stuff is wonderful and great and it's amazing and all this stuff. And that this is being influenced by them. And then in 6 to 8 weeks, they're going to get shown the door. And we're not going to remember the shown the door part. And of course, the algorithm at Facebook probably isn't going to show it to many people when he complains that it went the other way. Because everything that's put in front of us, it's amazing how well social media does this. Everything that's put in front of us is there for a reason. Somebody wanted it there. Some of the data points that they have on you, choose what you see, hear, and read. We're really propagandized to every day. I'll Google something stupid just to see how many things in a day will come back to me that has something like that in it. And I Google random stuff just to throw off the data points. And I suggest it. And this way you can see just how this system has been set up. And it's not just one. It seems like the universe, this entire social media universe, is getting the same information, because I'll Google something and YouTube will send me a video. Oh, hey, here's a notification. Did you see this? Click here. Now you can go, but Rick, that's a great thing. It's a great system. Helps me get what I need. I don't even have to go look for it. And in fact, I don't even know that I need it until they tell me this way that I can need it. Yeah, I'm sure that's very convenient for some, but not for a quote unquote democracy. Especially when the algorithm is set up in such a way to keep sending angry, hateful stuff. That's the frustration I have. To where the negative stuff that you're looking for, you're then inundated with. Where you don't ever see. Now, if it sends you a wide breadth of ideas and thoughts and, hey, so you're an anti-vaxxer. Here's a reason to get vaccinated. Here's a reason to get vaccinated and another one. And here's one debunking all of this stuff that you're reading. So that maybe you get a couple of different ideas. Maybe. Just thoughtful. But that's not how it works. They want you stuck there. They want your eyeballs on the application at all time because that's how they make their money. At the end of the day, all of this stuff is about money. It's about cashing in. It's about cashing in on your information. It's about cashing in on your purchases. It's about cashing in on your kids' information. It's about information, power, and cash. And yet we still buy into it. Yet we're still pitting ourselves against one another. The question I keep coming back to is, how does this change? How in the next election do people get information? How do people make choices? And how is this social media going to influence it? And the other thing I always ask is this the last free election? Because as I'm looking around at the states that have done all kinds of shenanigans to our vote, you have to be concerned about it. You got to be concerned about the direction things are going. From the time the Supreme Court overturned the Shelby decision till now, you've got to really be concerned. Because they're taking us in a really ugly, negative direction. It's just what it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on at Kellogg. Also, the horrible story at Amazon during the tornado. Lots to get to. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day prominent civil rights activist Ella Baker was born in Norfolk, Virginia. Her parents moved to Littleton, North Carolina when she was young. She often listened to her grandmother's stories of slave revolts and of the brutalities she endured under slavery. Ella attended the historically black college Shaw University, graduating in 1927. After college, she moved to New York City and worked as a journalist. Ella was profoundly impacted by the Harlem Renaissance and became an educator for the WBAI, teaching African and labor history. She immersed herself in the activism of the period and worked on the Scottsboro Boys Defense Campaign. By 1938, she had joined the NAACP, traveling across the country to direct membership recruitment, fundraising, and building of local branches. In 1952, Ella became president of New York City's NAACP chapter, working for desegregation and on police brutality cases. Baker went to Alabama to help found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference after the successful Montgomery bus boycott to organize voter registration drives throughout the South. From there, she formed and led the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Ella trained young, committed civil rights activists in a collectivist model of organizing and in participatory democracy. By 1964, she helped to organize the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party and its fight to become seated at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. She was involved in the defense of activist and friend Ann Braden, then targeted by HUAC, and later the Free Angelina movement in defense of then-jailed activist Angelina Davis. She was instrumental in the founding of the Third World Women's Alliance and supported various independence movements throughout the world. She died on her birthday in 1986.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I have written off Rice Krispie treats for the holiday season. No Rice Krispie treats at all. And that's usually one of the Christmas things that the kids love making. Sadly, not going to happen. Christmas tradition, well, stopped. And thank you, Kellogg's. The fact that you're now in the process of firing 1,400 workers because you refused to negotiate and bargain. Now, this means no more Kellogg's products to be purchased in our household. And look, I'm looking across social media and talking to union members, and they're saying the same things. In fact, I was at the supermarket the other day, and there was a sign someone had stuck on one of the boxes saying, "Do not buy this." That, in the middle of central Pennsylvania, that is huge. And here to talk a little bit about what's going on across the country, I've asked Jordan Zakarin to come talk with us. Jordan is a media producer there at More Perfect Union, perfectunion.us, their website. They've done some really fantastic videos and work on this. Jordan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
So look, I'm in the middle of central Pennsylvania in a small supermarket, and there is a sign on the box, just a little one. Someone wrote on a Post-it note, "Do not buy on strike." And I thought, that is fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I don't know if you're anywhere near Lancaster. It's one of the four places, one of the four plants where Kellogg's is on strike. Like you said, all 1,400 workers. And solidarity we're seeing, it's when you see it on the internet, right? You see it, people who are tweeting, "Don't buy Pringles, don't buy Kellogg's, Frosted Flakes." They got a lot of brands because, that's the way consolidation works these days. But there is a lot of popular support for this strike. I think that the fact that Joe Biden came out, he came out and came out against hiring permanent, temporary scabs, whatever they want to call them. Kellogg's trying to do that, and once the BCTGM locals rejected their contract, it is really building momentum. It's the continuing of Striketober, it's Strikesgiving, it's going to be Strikesmith, as a bunch of workers said to us on the line recently, and they've got a lot of popular opinion behind winning their sales.
No, and this is what community support is supposed to look like. This is what happens when the community realizes that they're all in this together, and that when those workers do better, maybe they're going to do better, and that snowball effect of people seeing successful strikes making people's lives better. This is the culmination of that.
It's really tough. What's impressive is that up in Battle Creek, we've been covering a lot, where the main Kellogg's factory is, where their headquarters is. The UAW members that went on strike in throughout Michigan and Illinois and Iowa, they brought their supplies over once their strike was over. We're seeing a lot of people bringing over pizzas, bringing over, really showing community solidarity for the 300 plus workers in this, in the plant that still remain there. I mean, Kellogg's wants to send 100-something jobs overseas to Mexico. They wouldn't take that out of the contract in the most recent offer. They used to have like double, triple the number of people working at that factory, maybe even more. And they've dwindled it down over the years. And the community members have seen how much, that's created, how much that struggle that's created. And so I think that this is not just about one contract. This is about the future. This is like an existential battle for the survival of that community, of the communities in Tennessee, in Omaha, and in Lancaster, and just for the future of the middle class. If they can break the back of Kellogg's, like John Deere workers got $10,000 bonuses that they did for when they signed the contract the UAW did last month. And so I think this is not just about the people who make cereal. This is about the ongoing, whether it's a Great Resignation or it's Striketober, or if it's people demanding more. And I think this has become like the central focus of it.
No, I mean, and that's an excellent point, because I think people are finally at this point where enough is enough. And I think Kellogg still thinks it's 2019, that they're going to bargain like it's 2019, when the reality is their workforce isn't there anymore. These kind of threats and this kind of intimidation might have worked then, and it did work in their Memphis plant a number of years back. But this is a different moment.
Yeah, I mean, they had a sugar box truck go off the rails on Friday, I believe, in Battle Creek, and I reported this. They couldn't get, and this was because they didn't have good help, right? They didn't have experienced temp workers. They didn't have people that were in the community. Not many people have crossed the picket lines. They had to get workers all the way from Ohio to come and help get it back on the track, because no one from Michigan who could possibly do that job would do it. There was kind of a disaster with scab workers early on. We have a video coming out tomorrow about how In part, they were just destroying the place. People who were being, paid to come in and do these jobs that they weren't really qualified to do, because this is skilled labor. There's no such thing as unskilled labor. And, it was a disaster. And then, they have not been able to get as much cereal out there. There's shortages everywhere. They're trying to produce in Mexico, and people are looking at the labels. So it is, I think there's a solidarity there now where there wasn't necessarily there before. After I think this point goes over and over again, these workers in Battle Creek and Lancaster and everywhere else, they were told they were essential workers. They were they didn't miss a day during the pandemic, and they want their comeuppance.
Yeah, no, look, we said they were heroes. They're patriots, and this is what we did to them. You're all fired. That doesn't sit well with even people who may be anti-union. I've talked to some people who don't believe in unions. Even they look at that and go, "That's kind of bad."
Yeah, I mean, it's just the directness. It's directly right afterwards. This is not even like a few years later that the kind of feeling sort of lingered for a while that went away. This is, back to business as usual right after calling these people heroes. This is back to business as usual while millions of people, 39 million people, have quit their jobs this year. And I think that people are fed up. I mean, you look at $11 million compensation to the CEO of Kellogg's last year. They don't want to make their workers whole again. They do not want to give them just equal pay. They're not asking to be millionaires. They're not asking for the world's largest pensions. They're not asking for Rolls Royces for all of them. They're asking for, hey, can you not make it up to 9 years before people get paid equally? And I think that anyone, whether they believe in a union or not, can say, hey, people should be paid equally. That's not right. If you put in a few years, you should be at the same rate as your coworkers.
Yeah.
I think anyone, whether they believe in, the collective bargaining process, whether they believe in the grievances, whether they believe in the lies that people say about unions, I think they can see through the rhetoric of, oh, we can't afford it, when they're making record profits.
No, I mean, I think we're in a moment where finally, at least I hope, that the working class of this country is looking back at the employer class and going, you've gotten away with too much for too long. There needs to be some kind of reset. And I'm looking at this moment, whether it's some of the policy that's coming out of the Biden administration, whether it's, people leaving their jobs, that there's got to be some kind of societal reset. People don't want to be working, 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week just to scrape by. That people think that work should be valued, and they should be valued. And I just think we're in that moment.
I mean, 800,000 Americans lost family members. 800,000 Americans died this year over the past couple of years. That is such an enormous number. And people think of it exponentially. How many people are related to people? How many people lost friends and family and loved ones? And thinking, you know what, this is not, why am I sitting in a factory for crappy wages, getting taken advantage of? Life is too short for that. A lot of the workers we talked to in Battle Creek were saying, this is the first time we've been able to see our families. We're not doing, these double shifts where all of a sudden we have to get a babysitter again when we got 5 minutes before the end of our shift. We're told, oh, you got to work another 4 hours. You got to work another 8 hours. People are saying, you know what, striking is rough. And it is rough on them. They're not getting paid the wages they're used to. They are, they're having to scrape by. Some people are getting part-time jobs. A lot of people are doing that. They're doing what they have to do. But they're seeing their families. They're getting to go to their kids' dance recitals. They're getting to go. One worker told me that he's finally coaching his kid's soccer team. And that's the sort of thing that you should be able to do on any job,
Yep.
Especially a unionized job where you're getting paid decent wages, but you can have some time off. And so I think just not only just the wages part, it's, hey, give us a life. Let us live the lives that we have, because life is too short.
No,
And
absolutely.
So I think that's a big part of it as well.
In fact, the pandemic, I think, has brought a lot of people around to that, which is why I understand there's a bill banging around Congress to lower the 40-hour work week down to 32. Because a lot of people are clamoring for that, because look, we finally took people looked up from the treadmill or the rat's wheel that they've been on for so long, that they finally realized there's something else.
Yeah, and people, a lot of people, I've been lucky to be able to work remotely, as a reporter, as a producer. A lot of people, were not, and their bosses threw them under the bus. They said, hey, we're laying you off, and we'll take big PPP loans, but we're not going to let you have anything, And so, why are people sacrificing their lives and their time and their health for these companies that not even doing right by them? It's one thing, I guess, if you're working around the clock but getting paid real well and treated real well. But in fact, people at tech companies who get that round the clock, who work around the clock and getting treated real well, get lattes in the cafeterias in their offices, they too are sick of it. And those are the really well compensated people. They're saying, hey, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it comes back down to that. Do you live to work or work to live? You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Jordan Zakarin. He's a media producer over at More Perfect Union. Their website, perfectunion.us. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at some of the fantastic work that they're doing there. Now, I'm sure you saw the horrific story from Kentucky and going across Arkansas, Kentucky, Indiana. But the one story that caught me, or actually two of them, one, the candle factory and the Amazon plant, where the stories are now coming out that the management team were saying, well, you can't leave because if you leave, you might get fired. And you go, who on what planet during a tornado goes, if you leave to go home and make sure your family's safe, you're going to get fired? Where does that happen other than here?
It's remarkable. It's like Squid Game in real life. I was saying that about the South Dakota Dash for Cash, where teachers were doing that, but it's really remarkable. In these Amazon factories, one of the big things is that you get points to get written up if you miss time, and that happens across the board in a lot of places. Whether you're a driver, whether you're in manufacturing, across the board, you get these points and you get threatened with them, and you have no choice. Otherwise, you're going to get fired. And Amazon workers were, they were told, they knew there was bad weather coming. They said, come in anyways. A lot of these places, they were saying, hey, come in anyways. Even the next day, once the disaster happened, there was nowhere to go. Companies were saying, hey, come in. Otherwise, you're getting written up. You're getting points. Amazon, what's remarkable is that, it's one of many places. I know Tesla does the same thing. A lot of manufacturing places do the same thing. No cell phones allowed. People are not allowed to communicate, and people are not allowed to, talk to loved ones. People are not allowed to find out the news of, hey, look, tornado's coming, get out of the way. And so, these people are just sitting ducks, really. They're just sitting ducks, and it happens across the board in factories nationwide and in, manufacturing places nationwide. And unfortunately, it led to a lot of deaths here. And I think one thing also to point out is that most of these people were not actually Amazon employees. They were working for staffing agencies. And, I've done a lot of stuff on Tesla, and that's the case there too. A lot of the workers there are just staffer. They work for staffing agencies. They get paid much less, and it inoculates Amazon, inoculates Tesla, the two richest men in the world run those companies, from being quote unquote responsible.
Yep.
They're saying, oh, it's not our job. It's not our job to keep people safe. 7 of the 190 workers at the Amazon factory were at the one that got leveled were full-time staff. The rest of them belong to staffing agencies. And that means that Amazon, in theory, and it shouldn't be, and maybe this will go to the NLRB, the NLRB I know is itching for opportunity to change this. Amazon is not responsible for their safety, not responsible for the deaths of at least 6 people, and injuries to so many more.
No,
And, when you have no responsibility to workers, whether it's, you don't have to keep them safe, you are all powerful. You have nowhere, there's no comeuppance, there's no way to hold you accountable. And that's not, it doesn't work.
Yeah, but none of this is new, Jordan. I mean, companies have been doing this for the last at least decade, having these third-party logistics companies have all the employees, and then if they get too uppity, or if they start talking about a union, they just change companies, and it's usually the same company who just reforms under another name, but all the rules are changed, and this is why we most certainly need comprehensive labor law reform in this country.
Yeah, it's one of the things where I've been covering this a lot with Tesla, is that they say, we're not responsible for the racism that happened here. We're not responsible for the abuses and the injuries and the COVID that happens here, because we've got these other companies that are employing people, and also they also force them to sign forced arbitration agreements as well. And that's another thing where it's much harder to go to a court of law because they're trying to force you towards arbitration. And ironically, Tesla got screwed over by that, because a lot of their workers were not that were part of a staffing agency were able to sue because they weren't forced into arbitration. And so, I think that forced arbitration is a bad thing, and I think that these staffing agencies are a bad thing. And hopefully, the NLRB under Jennifer Bruzzo in the Biden administration can straighten it out. Say, no, look, if they're working in your place, they're working in your factory, they're working for you, they're driving your trucks, you're responsible for them.
No, because I'm waiting for the day when there's not even a staffing company there where they just hire a bunch of independent contractors, and you're your own boss working in the warehouse or in the factory. You're your own boss. You don't work for us. You work for yourself.
And that's Uber, right?
And that's coming.
I mean, that's Uber, that's Lyft, that's Instacart, that's all those places are doing that. I know a lot of by the ports. We just had a story today about how a lot of truck drivers at different ports across the country are independent contractors or independent drivers, and they have to pay out their own way for everything, and they're responsible for their own safety. And I mean, you know that better than me. And
No,
so
we've been talking
we're
about
seeing
that for about 10 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, the Teamsters have put an awful lot of effort into organizing these independent contractors, and our law won't allow them to be organized. They're an association, but they can't be unionized. But we were down in 2015, we were down in Savannah, and we were talking to port drivers there, and a guy showed me for a 2-week paycheck, he made 98 cents. The rest of it was all of his truck payment, his fuel costs, his insurance. A couple of times, I guess he took the wrong trailer bottom. He took the right box, but just put it on the wrong chassis, and they ended up fining the heck out of him. It was just all kinds of craziness where you go, this guy worked 80 hours a week for 2 weeks and made 98 cents.
It's and you know, I've been working on a story about one big major company that does one of the snack companies, and even the ones that are unionized, they can nickel and dime these drivers. And you know, we have a story about how the truck driving shortage, quote unquote, is not really a shortage. It's people not wanting to deal with these crappy conditions, whether it's being an independent driver or being someone that gets nickel and dimed and tossed to the side.
No, look, I got a CDL. I don't want to drive anymore. Want no part of the industry. And I work for a union company. I don't want to deal with all the headaches on the road. I don't want to deal with all of the stuff that goes on. And I'm not alone. This is a lot of drivers. And the wages for drivers to put their lives on the line, I'm sorry, it just isn't worth it. And the conditions are horrible. I mean, it's from top to bottom, there are problems that need to be addressed. And we're just not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this story I've been working on, people continuously, because they're driven literally to the point of exhaustion, just falling asleep at the wheel, you know, trying or pulling over because they just cannot make it all the way, and getting in trouble, getting fired, or, you know, forced to, like, you know, their car rolls into a ditch because they didn't put their parking brake on. And so it's not just wrong, it's dangerous.
Yep.
And it's putting a lot of other people at risk. And the same thing happens with same thing happened with the Amazon factory or Tesla factory. People are getting injured, people are getting killed, and, you know, families are being put out, and these companies just get off scot-free.
And that's why they need to be held accountable. And this is why I say every person should have a union contract. They should have someone behind them. Because look, if I worked in a place that said, hey, there's a tornado coming, but you have to stay, I'd be home with my family. I'd be leaving in a moment, and my union would be backing me up. But Jordan, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Really good stuff, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Good stuff, Jordan Zakarin. Make sure you check out their work over at perfectunion.us. They do fantastic stuff. Going to take a quick break right here. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That was the day that Namibian workers began a general strike to protest the contract labor system. As a colony of South Africa until 1990, Namibia faced many of the same apartheid-like measures that blacks faced in South Africa. Black migrant workers in Namibia comprised the majority of workers in the diamond mines, fisheries, and commercial farms. They were forced to live in the northern third of the country and were subjected to the pass system. The pass system determined where they could live and work and when they could travel. Restrictions on their rights as workers were directly tied to restrictions they experienced as colonial subjects. Because there were no trade unions at the time, this strike is considered to be an important first step in the 20-year fight for independence. More than 13,500 black contract workers participated, effectively shutting down 23 key workplaces and 11 mines. The indigenous Ovambo and Kavango workers demanded the right to choose jobs and contracts, to bring their families to distant work locations, a new pass system, and increased wages based on work type, not skin color. In her book, Labor and Democracy in Namibia, Gretchen Bauer says that while workers did win wage increases, the pass system remained largely intact. Employers were angry that workers now had the right to bid on jobs, quit at will, and receive holiday bonuses and leave pay. Workers were upset that they were still subjected to restrictions of movement and arbitrary arrest and detention. But the strike began the long process of eroding the pass system, contract labor, and second-class citizenship for the indigenous workers of Namibia. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently, Sony is canceling Dr. Oz. I guess January 13th is the last Dr. Oz show that they're going to be airing, according to news reports. And look, he was going to have to give up the show anyway. I'm waiting for the victim card to be played here. Oh, they're taking my job away. No, look, I was told a long time ago, if I wanted to run for State House where I live, which has come up a couple of times, I've had a bunch of people ask me to run for Congress and run for all kinds of things. And I'd have to give up doing what I do because you can't be on the public airways. It's the way it's been explained to me, and run for public office. Because it comes down to, look, he's on stations in Philadelphia and in other places. That's going to be the end of it. Also, I do find it interesting that Dr. Oz is very unhappy that the Philadelphia Inquirer is going to use his real name instead of Dr. Oz in any of their reporting. Now, they say it's their policy to use people's real name when they're running for office. And in their defense, they did that with Val Arkush, who is a doctor. They never identified her as such. So there is precedent in their defense. But I think they just gave him a whole bunch of victim points. And look, he's going to use it. He's going to use it to get the minions to throw him some money and some credibility. So way to go, Philly Inquirer. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So have you seen this Dr. Oz story?
Right, and one point that I wanted to make on it, that I read it and I thought, okay, Sony, come on. Sony did not cite Oz's candidacy in its announcement. What is up with that, first of all? Of course they're getting him off air because he's a candidate, because they're under the FCC. You have to give equal time.
Right.
But Sony didn't cite their reasons. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah,
Okay.
It seems to me, and I look at the Philly Inquirer doing the same thing, and the Inquirer
Right.
did go to lengths explaining their position. Not
Right.
that any of my Republican listeners are going to bother looking it up. Not that any of the victim crowd is going to bother reading what their rationale was. All they know is they're torching poor old Dr. Oz. They're doing to him what they do. They wouldn't do this to anybody else.
Right. I mean, look, he can do his commercials. He can, do it any type of way he wants to do it, with putting whatever, Dr. Wizard of Oz, whatever he wants to put, he can do that. I mean, it's up to him.
Doc, I like that. I think I'm telling you right now, I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
Dr. Wizard of Oz, because I can't pronounce his first name. I'm sorry, and I don't mean to sound. And this isn't me taking a position. I've just never heard it said before. Mehmet, maybe I don't know. I'm hoping someone will explain it to me. Can you say it? Don't laugh.
Yes, I can. Mehmet Oz.
What is it?
Mehmet. Because Mehmet.
Mehmet. Okay, I think I can say that. Okay, now I've got it.
You're close. No cigar, but you're close. Carol like that.
Okay, I get the hand grenade.
You get
version.
it. Okay. Right.
Mehmet.
Right.
Okay.
Mehmet. You got it.
Met. Okay, I got it. There we go. See, you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah. See.
But that's what they're going to call him in the
Wizard of
newspaper,
Oz.
and I think that's right,
the
because that's what's going to be on the. Wouldn't isn't that what you would want on the ballot? I mean, would they put Dr. Oz on the ballot?
Well, that's an interesting point too. When I first ran, I had signed my voter Robert William Ney, and all my items said Bob Ney. I freaked out. I won anyway. After that, I signed everything Bob Ney. so I didn't have to actually put Robert on. So I think you can. Well, I don't know Pennsylvania law. I take that back. But in Ohio, as long as you're not attempting to defraud by a certain name, we had a sheriff one time, Peanut Carpenter, and I think he put Peanut Carpenter on the ballot.
Oh,
yeah. It's a local thing.
No. And look, I think, because I think about this having wanting to run at certain points.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who have nicknames that they're known by.
Right.
That I think I have actually seen like their full name with like in the middle of the parentheses their nickname.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't ever remember seeing someone with doctor on there. So this is one of those things that's throwing me because look, I don't want him to, I don't want anyone treated unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, this isn't that big of a deal when you look at what the Inquirer has done in the past.
Well, what he should do is he should petition to put Dr. Oz on the ballot. And then when they deny him, he makes a great big deal about it that they put other people's nicknames. Obviously, they want to stop him. And, then make a big deal about that and get some publicity.
No, and this is look. He's using this for maximum publicity.
Sure.
He's running around crying foul everywhere because no one plays victim like conservatives do, at least in my view. And you can disagree, but you'd be wrong.
Hey, I came up with Wizard of Oz.
Yes, you did, and that is a fabulous.
You're going to use that one. That's going to ride through the election.
I am going to use that one through the election.
Right.
Anyway, I've given the Wizard a little bit too much already.
Too much time. Okay.
I wanted to get your thoughts on. We've now surpassed 800,000 dead because of COVID. Dr. Fauci said, "Well, we're going to have to deal with more booster shots." Is that the right messaging?
I don't think it is. Look, I understand that we may have to have additional boosters. I've had my third shot, my booster, and my doctor told me actually 2 years ago, when this whole thing started, he told me that we probably will end up with boosters every year like flu shots, okay?
Right.
So instead of booster, it's a COVID shot, but, we call it booster, just like you get a flu shot. But I think it is the wrong message because if I remember correctly, last time I looked it up, we were at 58% of people with 2 shots. And if we just say, well, we'll just all get boosters, I've had my 3rd booster, I'll get my 4th, my 5th, et cetera, to protect myself, and my dad will get his, he's 98, But I do think it's the wrong message to think that or give the impression that the boosters will be part of life and that'll do it. Because the fact remains that the people not vaccinated are a problem. That is the problem.
Yep.
And you've got 27 or 37 people kicked out of the Air Force.
Yeah.
And one of them was in a high position, willing to lose involuntary separation pay, willing to lose it because he wouldn't get a shot.
And that's a choice, and I'm okay with that. That is the system. He's made a choice, and I'm not going to hold him down and make him do it. I do want to know why. I want to know how people become this radicalized on this issue.
I don't know. I don't understand it. I mean, if it were down to well, I'm a little torn on this too. People say, well, I'm ill. Well, if they're afraid to get the shot because they're ill, what are they going to do if they get COVID?
Yeah.
They're going to die.
Yeah. No, I was in the hospital today for about 8 hours, and a small hospital in the middle of central Pennsylvania, where we haven't been hit by COVID that hard. Really, we've been very, very fortunate. The hospital was full. We waited sat in a chair in a hallway for hours waiting, along with a whole bunch of other people. And they split the waiting ER area into the COVID half and the non-COVID half. And half the people there were COVID patients, hacking and coughing and doing their thing on one side of the aisle. And then there must have been a magic barrier between them, because just a couple feet away was the non-COVID side where I was sitting. And people were waiting 10, 12, 14 hours for stuff, and you go, there are no beds, there's nowhere to go with anything. And as I was talking to some of the workers there, and they go like, this is how it is. There's nowhere to go with people. We have no more room. There's no more room at the inn, and we're not even in a bad spot yet.
And most of the people, I'm assuming, in that hospital that were there for COVID were unvaccinated people for the most part.
Yep, and that's what I asked. I said, and she was like, "Well, I can't tell you, but
Yep.
the majority are not vaccinated."
Sure, and that's statistically the way it runs. Here's the other thing too, and I got yelled at on my Facebook to the point I deleted the guy. I don't normally do that, people can get yelling whatever they want, but he went after me because I had made a statement which I think is accurate, that by people not having the vaccinations and by the hospital beds being overloaded, things that are deemed to be, quote, air quotes, elective are not really elective. A lot of them are life-threatening and can cause death. And he said, well, stick to politics. I'm a doctor. He was a doctor. Well, my point to that is at one of the hospitals, Licking County, Ohio, Rick, they had shut down the entire cardiac rehab section.
Yep.
Now, we'll deem that elective, but guess what? If you don't get cardio rehab, guess what can happen to you? You have a heart attack.
Yeah, another one.
Right. So I just think that, this is not put into the seriousness of the vein that it should be.
Yep.
Because now the space is taken up by people who have not been vaccinated by their choice, like you said, but they've not been vaccinated, so they're taking space up now, and people that are going to, be potentially in serious medical problems because they don't get their, quote, elective procedures are going to be on the wrong side of this.
No. I mean, the ER was, and look, the person said it was not even bad today. You should have been here the other day, where the waits were almost double. I'm going, we sat there 8 hours for something that should have taken no more than 2 hours to get it out of any normal ER. But there we were, nowhere to go, no facilities, and like I said, things haven't gotten bad yet. We're moving up. As I said the other day on the show, there are a couple of the systems going, hey, we're on the verge of collapse, and I got to see it firsthand today, and it's frightening because we haven't hit peak numbers yet.
Right.
And that's always been the concern of mine. Look, I know the majority of people who get COVID are gonna survive. I know the majority aren't gonna have long COVID. A good number will, but the majority's not. It's everything else when your healthcare system collapses. It's the policeman they brought in who was injured, who doesn't get seen right away. It's the woman who had the heart attack, or the man who had the heart attack. It's those people who well, there's nowhere for you. Sorry, don't know what to do.
Right.
That's the crazy part.
It's a major problem.
I want to also get your thoughts on what's going on in Kentucky and Arkansas and across Indiana as the tornado ripped through that area. And look, I give Joe Biden credit. He immediately got resources out. In fact, even Mitch McConnell said, hey, thanks, Joe, for doing that immediately. I do find it interesting, though, that Rand Paul did ask for help when Rand has been against every disaster relief bill for New York, Puerto Rico, Louisiana, Texas, you name it. He's been against it, but here he is. Hey, we need some money in Kentucky.
Sure. And, Biden did act fast. The president did. And FEMA got in there, acted very fast. And I can't imagine anybody would criticize him. And again, if Rand Paul needs help, he'll ask, obviously. For the state. Yeah,
I wish them the best. Some of the horror stories I heard, I hope we get to the bottom of. Finally, what's on Schumer's Christmas list this year?
Ooh, he has a few things. We'll have to see if he's been naughty or nice. But he's really he's kind of putting out a special stocking towards West Virginia. He wants that West Virginia Christmas gift. That's the mansion.
Yeah. No, come on, Joe.
Not the mansion you live in, the mansion.
Yeah.
Right. See what happens with that. Of course, they've got they've obviously avoided a problem with the debt ceiling, the debt limit process. But right now, his wish list is, getting a gift from Senator Manchin. Supposedly, Senator Sinema privately, has said that, she's going to be on board, kind of punting towards Manchin. So Schumer is attempting, as leader of the Senate, leader of the Democratic side, is attempting to get this done pre-Christmas, not to, roll into the next year. And so we've got to see, can the Senate Democrats have some unity, and what will Senator Manchin do? Where is he at? I know the president's speaking to him. So that is on the wish list for Christmas.
Yeah, they shouldn't go anywhere until they get the Build Back Better and the voting rights done. I mean, the voting rights, I would take the voting rights over everything else. That has got to get done.
Right. It's important.
It's got to get done. Bob, as always, I appreciate the thoughts,
you, Rick.
the time, good stuff.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, seriously, I'm hoping something is going to come around on the voting rights, because as we've been talking about, that is at the center of everything in our democratic process. If you can't trust the results out of the ballot box, if you can't believe that they're going to be counted fairly, and I'm looking across the states where they're putting into place ways where the General Assembly or the legislature can overturn the results because they're original intenters. Because you're never really supposed to vote for the president, right? At least that's what they're telling us, right? And they're going to make that possible. And this is where all of the coup stuff came from. Hey, we don't really need to count the votes. We just need to, maybe just kind of a thought where we, don't certify those electors, and then the House of Representatives gets to vote. Yeah, that's the ticket. Scary stuff. But lots of craziness. And there's a bunch of stuff I wanted to get to with Bob. And maybe we'll get to him back on some of this stuff tomorrow, especially with the stuff that's going on with Israel and Iran. He's my resident expert on this. It seems like there's a lot of saber rattling going on, and it seems like the Biden administration wants to move us in a direction where we're going back to bringing the nuclear plan back, which I think is not a bad idea. But we'll see how that all plays out. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Subscribe, share, comment, all of that stuff. But more importantly, get the podcast. Get the podcast. Share it. Tell your friends, and then tune in here every weeknight. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
What does your toothbrush, a fish dinner, and your running shoes have in common? Plastic. We now live on planet plastic. Billions of tons of waste from everyday products made of these chemical contaminants are strewn literally everywhere, on the highest mountaintops, into the deepest seabeds, in dense tropical jungles, and all across barren deserts. It's estimated, for example, that in less than 30 years, the gross volume of discarded plastic in our oceans will outnumber fish. From grocery carry-out bags to shower curtains to almost invisible bits of microplastics, the vast tonnage of this trash increases every minute, with an afterlife lasting centuries, wreaking havoc on ecosystems, destroying species, and infusing our water, air, soil, food, and us. Consider just two common products, your toothbrush and your sneakers. Until the 1930s, toothbrushes were made of degradable natural components. Since then, practically all have been throwaway plastic brushes. But there is no away, so nearly all of the trillions of brushes we've discarded in the past century are still out there, somewhere on the land or in our water. Moving from your teeth to your feet, consider that millions of sneakers are sold in the U.S. each year. advertised as being athletic and cool. What's uncool is that they're made almost entirely of melted and molded plastics that are practically impossible to recycle. So, after a short time in our closets, sneakers spend an eternity as globs of toxic plastic trash. This is Jim Hightower saying, we're being choked by our own synthetic waste, from billions of plastic bottles and cigarette filters to tons of straws and synthetic rubber tires. To help stop the insanity, contact Beyond Plastics, beyondplastics.org.